Welcome to the Bitcoin Magazine Pro Masterclass. I'm Matt Crosby, and today I'll be helping you to understand Bitcoin, whether it's something you're exploring for the first time, whether you've been in the space for many years and you're just wanting a quick refresher on the underlying technology of Bitcoin, what it really is as an asset, as a technology, and how we can use the data surrounding Bitcoin and the metrics available on Bitcoin Magazine Pro to better understand and comprehend what is happening with not just the network, but the markets and the users and sentiment in the space in general. So first and foremost, to understand Bitcoin, we have to rewind the clock. If we go back to 2008, we can see this is when Bitcoin was really born. Satoshi Nakamoto, the anonymous founder of Bitcoin, sent out an email to a cypherpunk group sharing his creation, which was the Bitcoin white paper, a fully peer-to-peer, no trusted third-party electronic cash system. And if you'd like to go through and read all of these historic emails, forum posts, and all the other interactions of Satoshi, then you can go to the Satoshi Nakamoto Institute to read through all of his previous communications. But from that, as I said, we were given the peer-to-peer electronic cash system that we know and love today, that is Bitcoin. Now again, I definitely recommend having a read through this white paper, even if it is a little technical to understand. Ultimately, it does give you a good solid foundation to the underlying technology of Bitcoin and how it works. And we're not going to go fully in depth with all of this today to make it too technical, but we will cover over the course of this series a lot more of the more in-depth and nuanced technical features, such as the proof-of-work mining system and how Bitcoin as a network truly functions. But we have to acknowledge that this wasn't the first attempt to make a proof of work or a cryptocurrency that Bitcoin really is. We can see back in 1997, over a decade prior to this, we had hashcash. So this wasn't something that was created out of thin air. This is something that many cypherpunks or people that wanted to kind of escape the traditional monetary system had been working on for a long time. But Bitcoin was the first time that we truly succeeded in this and had something that fulfilled all of the criteria we were after. But following the October 31st publication of the Bitcoin white paper in 2008. A few months later, on the January the 3rd, 2009, we had the Bitcoin Genesis block. Now, again, we don't need to know the exact technical details of all of these parts of information and data points regarding exactly how Bitcoin works right now. We will get onto that a little bit later. But this was essentially the birth of Bitcoin. This is when the first Bitcoin went into circulation. What we can see is in this Genesis block, there was actually a message left. The Times, January the 3rd, 2009, Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. Now, this just summarizes Bitcoin's true purpose perfectly. We can see that on this time, it was during the great financial crisis of 2008 and the fallout of this, when the UK Chancellor was on the brink of another bailout for the banks. Bitcoin was created to supply another system, another means of monetary transactions that didn't rely on central parties and intermediaries that could dictate our transactions and control our lives. And what we can see is the Bitcoin code that was released was fully open source. So you can go onto GitHub here and you can actually download Bitcoin itself. All Bitcoin is a piece of code. It's a network, it's software, and it's a lot more than that. So what we can do is we can actually clarify and define different parts within Bitcoin. So just for quickly, Bitcoin with a capital B is typically referring to the technology itself because, again, Bitcoin is an evolving piece of software. It's a network that we can conduct transactions on, but really it's just sending information, almost like emails that are worth value. And we'll get onto that a little bit later. But what we can see is Bitcoin with a lowercase b generally refers to the underlying units of currency themselves, the digital Bitcoin themselves. We usually don't put an S on to pluralize Bitcoin. We usually just have Bitcoin, but then there's BTC, which is usually what we refer to as the ticker symbol. So if you're ever buying Bitcoin on an exchange or trading it, similar to how the USD refers to the US dollar, BTC refers to Bitcoin. But as I said, this is a completely open source system. You can go and verify your own transactions. You can use Bitcoin however you want to use it. And what we can do is, because it's on a open network, a blockchain system, the underlying technology that Bitcoin was created on, all this really means is an open ledger. Now, Again, to simplify that even further, it's recording every single transaction that has ever happened. A lot of people point to Bitcoin as a true anonymous network, and while you can't see who's actually sending Bitcoin from one address to another, we can see every Bitcoin that has ever been sent. We can see every address that has ever held Bitcoin, and we can see here in real time transactions coming through. So what we can see is Bitcoin being sent all day. Every single day, Bitcoin is being sent from addresses one to the other. And what we can see is these come through every 10 minutes or so on average. There are mechanisms in place to ensure that this is fairly consistent, but again, we'll cover that a little bit later. But essentially, Bitcoin allows you to transact almost any amount of money to anyone in the world without any permission, practically instantly, well, with a 10-minute delay, for just a few fractions of a dollar, currently about 13 cents for high priority. And what we can see is if we just scroll down here, you could send millions of dollars, billions of dollars in one transaction, again, from one address to another. So a lot of people say Bitcoin doesn't have any intrinsic value, it doesn't provide anything, but being able to provide the means of almost instantaneous, practically free transactions to anywhere on the world is truly amazing. So if we just click on one of these transactions, for example, what we can see is we can see the address it's going from and the address it's going to. We can see the entire history of this address. We can see all the Bitcoin they've ever received or sent. And from this, we can actually analyze what's happening on Bitcoin. If you imagine shares in a company, for example, it would take months to figure out who's buying, who's selling during quarterly reports, if there's more shares being created or issued. But Bitcoin, we can tell all of this information, the supply and demand economics, in real time. Now, I made a reference earlier that Bitcoin may be similar to gold, a digital gold, and this is probably the fairest comparison we have because Bitcoin doesn't have a CEO or a board members to create or decide what Bitcoin should be. It's not a company that's like shares. And it's similar to gold in the fact that it's a scarce material such as gold. It's a commodity that people want. But there are some distinct differences. We can see that over the last few years, gold has gone absolutely parabolic to the upside. The price has gone from around $1,600 to over $4,500 in just a few years. But in the same period of time, Bitcoin went from around $15,000 to over $120,000, a significantly greater return, even if gold was making all of the headlines. But if we actually look at the underlying traits of Bitcoin and gold and fiat currencies, now these are currencies such as the US dollar, which aren't intrinsically backed by anything. Now, historically, this wasn't the case. You used to, at least theoretically, be able to trade your US dollars for pieces of gold, but this isn't the case anymore. The US dollar isn't necessarily backed by anything, which means it can be inflated. You probably noticed over the past few years, things are getting a little bit more expensive, and that's because more and more dollars are entering circulation. But if we just look at the traits of what money really is, we can see some of the key differences. So, for example, portability. Like I was showing previously with the ability to send Bitcoin anywhere in the world for a very, very cheap price. If you're trying to move millions of dollars worth of gold bars overseas, this is going to be an incredibly difficult, expensive, and time-consuming process to do. Whereas once you get into the more technical aspects of actually owning Bitcoin yourself and verifying your own transactions and being your own bank, you'll understand that you can actually hold Bitcoin, your entire net worth, millions, potentially billions of dollars in Bitcoin by just remembering a few words in your head. You don't need any physical gold bars in a vault. You don't need a safe to actually put your notes of money. You can just remember certain words and transact and carry your Bitcoin to anywhere in the world. Durability as well. We can see Bitcoin isn't a physical thing. It's not something that we can burn or necessarily physically lose. It's a software. It's strings of numbers and letters. This can't be broken. It's backed by mathematics and physics. And again, it's highly divisible. If you're trying to pay for something in gold, try and buy a cup of coffee that's worth a slither of gold, it's going to be very difficult to actually pay for that transaction. But one Bitcoin, which again is a little bit of a misconception, isn't a whole unit of measurement. If we just quickly go back here, what we can see is you can transact up to 100 millions of a Bitcoin. This is called a Satoshi. So there's different units of denomination, almost like a dollar and a cent. We have Bitcoin and Satoshis. So we can see that these can go down to the 100th million of a Bitcoin. So it's very, very divisible. Now, I won't go through all of these traits of money, but as you can see, Bitcoin is far exceeding the traits necessary to be a true form of money compared to gold or other fiat currencies. The only score on this chart in which it doesn't score high is its government issued state, which is incredibly low. Again, Bitcoin isn't controlled by one entity. No nation can confiscate your Bitcoin. No one can tell you what to do with it. And what we can see is Bitcoin is still a relatively small asset. We can see in the grand scheme of things, if I just look on this, that its market cap is currently around $2 trillion. It peaked at around 2.5 trillion. Now, if we compare that to the market cap of gold, which is somewhere between 20 and 30 trillion, we can see Bitcoin is still around a tenth the size of gold. And we're around the tenth the size of the amount of circulating dollars as well, which we'll come back to in a second. But one thing we do need to acknowledge is when people are referring to the price of Bitcoin, they're usually talking about the underlying cost of one Bitcoin. But because Bitcoin is an inflationary asset, we need to take into consideration its market cap, which is the underlying price of Bitcoin, which may be $80,000, $100,000, hopefully in the future a little bit more than that, say $150,000. What we can do then is multiply this price by the circulating supply, which again we'll come back to. But once you multiply those together, you get the market capitalization. Because a lot of people may look at alternate cryptocurrencies and say, well, it's considerably cheaper, therefore there's much more upside. It's only worth a few cents or a few dollars, whereas Bitcoin has recently surpassed $100,000, so maybe I get more for my money. But if there's a huge circulating supply of these altcoins, then the upside potential is still very much limited because there's so much in circulation and the inflation rate may be so high that they are still very much limited to how much earnings you could make. Whereas Bitcoin is a little bit different. We can actually track the circulating supply of Bitcoin and predict its issuance going forward indefinitely. So before we get onto that, if we just look to the US M2 money supply, for example, now this is the supply of fiat money, the supply of US dollars, as well as that, the amount of cash equivalents, checking deposits, saving deposits, etc., of less than $100,000. So essentially, this is the amount of money in circulation within the United States. Now, this is currently at around $22 trillion. So again, Bitcoin is still considerably smaller than the amount of circulating US dollars. And Bitcoin's a global asset, it's not just limited to the US. But the thing is with the US dollar is you can see, for example, here during the COVID 2020 pandemic, we can see in a very, very short space of time, trillions of dollars can be printed. Now, what this means is goods get more expensive, you lose purchasing power. The reason why gold has been doing incredibly well recently is because people are worried about inflation. They're seeing their dollars worth less and less. And ultimately, money is just energy. It's how much energy you're willing to store, how much work have you put in, and will that be able to afford the goods and services you've worked towards in the future? Now, gold is doing this very, very well because if you bought a bar of gold years or decades ago and buried it in the edge of your garden, that gold bar would still buy you a relatively similar or even more amount of goods and services. Where if you buried a huge stack of dollar bills in your garden or hid it under your mattress, in a few years or especially a few decades, this is going to buy you significantly less than it initially did. One way we can really visualize this is if we take into account real estate, for example, the average cost of a house. We usually see that referred to as one of the safe haven, the best stores for your wealth. But we can see if we look at the actual price of property in the US denominated in US dollars, again, we can see this is very much the case, especially between these COVID years. The average or median house price increased substantially. Whereas measured in Bitcoin, the average price of a US house is decreasing significantly and very, very rapidly. So Bitcoin doesn't just retain purchasing power, it increases your purchasing power. And as I referred to previously, this is due to the fact that Bitcoin has a hard cap. There can never be more Bitcoin created. There can never be more Bitcoin printed, found on an asteroid, found deep underground. Bitcoin is finite. We can never have more than 21 million Bitcoin. It is hard-coded into the software itself. And what we can see, this isn't a linear inflationary rate. This is decreasing every 4 years due to what's called the Bitcoin halving event, which we'll cover more in depth in a future episode. But if we look at the first 4 years or so of Bitcoin's existence, we could see around 10 million Bitcoin came into circulation. Now, if we look to 4 years later, only around 5 million more Bitcoin came into circulation. And 4 years later than that, we saw around 2.5 million. 4 years after that, around 1.25 million. So we can see that there's a very diminishing inflationary rate in the Bitcoin code itself. So we're never going to see ever more than 21 million Bitcoin in circulation, and we're not going to see that last fraction of a Bitcoin actually hit the network until 2140, well over a century into the future. Now, if I just add on the Bitcoin price, what we can see is this is a logarithmic chart. So we can see all the way back here, it started at less than $1, and today we can see the Bitcoin price hovering around six-figure territory. Usually we measure Bitcoin and look at the Bitcoin price chart in these logarithmic charts, because then it goes from 1 to 10 to 100. We're looking in base 10 scales as opposed to a linear scale where Bitcoin going from a few dollars to over $100,000 would look like a crazy bubble to the upside. You'd see price absolutely rapidly going up, and this wouldn't be a very fair means of measuring Bitcoin. But the same can be true if you look at the S&P 500 or other comparable assets that have moved up for extended periods of time. So just one thing to note when you're actually analyzing Bitcoin is usually we're looking at it at a logarithmic scale. But as I said, Bitcoin was created to escape the monetary system that seems to be plaguing not just the US, but most of the global economies. And this is a huge debt-driven cycle. If we look at the federal debt here, keeping in mind that the amount of circulating dollars in the world is around 22 trillion, the circulating debt just in the US is over 38 trillion. Now, this isn't sustainable. We're essentially robbing wealth from our future selves. We're making tomorrow us pay for today. And this isn't fair. It means the work that you're putting in to actually secure your wealth, to earn energy, to put this work to actually try and provide yourself some goods and services is diminishing. This purchasing power isn't fair. Bitcoin is the solution to this. Bitcoin isn't printing itself, it isn't issuing debt, it isn't stealing from the future. It's maintaining and increasing your purchasing power throughout time. Now, if you'd like to learn more about how you can actually initially hold Bitcoin, if it's not something you've ever really considered before, if you go to bitcoin.org or any other of the open source Bitcoin wallets, it can help you to actually try and obtain your first fraction of a Bitcoin, to start potentially dollar cost averaging in just small bits here and there to actually get a feel for how Bitcoin works. And maybe then you can start sending it and actually start analyzing your Bitcoin transactions to, again, get some idea and feel for how Bitcoin works. Because like I said, this is a technology. It's not something that we necessarily just have to buy and keep on an exchange. It's a money. This is something that we can transact in. If we go all the way back to where we started on the Bitcoin white paper, it's a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Bitcoin is here to be spent. It's here to be stored. It's here to maintain your purchasing power. Bitcoin can be whatever we want it to be, but ultimately Bitcoin is the best money the world has ever seen. And that's why it has value. It's energy turned into a commodity in a way that we've never seen before. So I hope you all enjoyed this first episode of our Bitcoin Masterclass, going from the very basics of what Bitcoin is all the way up to being a true advanced analyst in the space, understanding all of the things that are influencing the Bitcoin price action, how you can get a little bit more bang for your buck and maybe try and understand the network a little bit more to realize the sentiment, the extreme fear and extreme greed that influences investors and actually gives us these bull and bear markets. So hopefully you did enjoy this, and if so, please stick around because we have lots of great content still to come. And I'd just like to thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.